Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm going to be talking about the controversy of the author of Pit Babe wanting to remove the Omegaverse from the second book and the second season of the show. But before that, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the people who have been leaving such kind comments on my video about how nice and soothing my voice sounds. I have never gotten that compliment before, so it's really sweet and it's really nice to hear, and I appreciate those comments a lot. And once again, I hope I'm in the center of the frame. I'm using my back-facing camera, and because it is super sunny today, I cannot use the reflection of my window to make sure I am in the center. So please forgive me if I am not. So my plan is to go through a little genre history first and kind of catch everyone up to speed who might not be already, explain the controversy that's going on with Pit Babe, and then share my own thoughts on the matter. And a quick disclaimer before we start, I am a huge Omegaverse fan, so take with that what you will. And I did watch season 1 of Pit Babe, but I did not read the novel. Let's start with a little history of the Omegaverse. I do have some notes, so if I'm looking down, I am looking at those. The Omegaverse is kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different tropes that have been used in various different media types to varying degrees that all came together in this one genre that so far has lasted the test of time and the test of fandom culture and has kind of become a part of the fandom cultural zeitgeist, such as the concept of mating and heat cycles among humans instead of animals was popularized in the 1967 Star Trek episode Amok Time, which introduced the concept of Ponfar, which is the Vulcan mating cycle where Vulcan males must mate or die, which has become a very popular plot concept in Star Trek fanfiction and also will be familiar to us if you are familiar with the Omegaverse. I believe this is also the origin or one of the major contributing factors to the origin of the sex pollen trope, though I'm not as well versed on that. The 1969 Ursula K. Le Guin novel, The Left Hand of Darkness, is about an extraterrestrial androgynous world with hermaphroditic characters and mating cycles named Khmer. Kemmer. I am not familiar with that specifically. I just literally copied exactly what Wikipedia told me about it, so I'm taking their word for it. And then the animal transformation aspect, which is in some Omegaverse, but not in all. Of course, we'd be extremely familiar from shows Teen Wolf, Buffy, Werewolf Media, Twilight, Harry Potter with an animagus. It's where that's something that we're all very familiar with. The origin of the Omegaverse trope as we know it is generally attributed to the supernatural fandom. And then I had not heard of this, but another source of inspiration could have been the science fiction drama Dark Angel, where supernatural actor Jensen Ackles plays twin super soldiers with feline DNA, and the females of their species go into heat. The first works recognized as Omegaverse were published in mid-2010. That year in May, a writing prompt was shared on a live journal community dedicated to supernatural, mentioning alpha males and other various things that I'm worried if I'll be able to get away with saying or not on YouTube. Go look up the Wikipedia article. That is where I got all this information from. That prompt inspired user Te Dirtiest Sock to write I Ain't No Lady, But You'd Be the Tramp, which was real person fiction on the supernatural actors as Alpha and Omega, and it was published on July 24th of 2010. Despite not using the term Omega exactly, the story created many of the characteristics later associated with the Omegaverse genre. Over the next few months, other anonymous authors shared similar stories until on November 9th, a new writing prompt mentioned Alpha, Beta, and Omega men for the first time, spurring the creation of 3 works. By June 2011, the term Omegaverse had become commonplace, and the following month, in July of 2011, the first Fem/Omegaverse was published, and that is also the first recorded use of the Omegaverse tropes outside of the supernatural fandom. The genre subsequently expanded in popularity to other fan communities such as Sherlock, X-Men First Class, Hannibal, Teen Wolf, The Avengers, and so many more. A Chinese translation of an Omegaverse Sherlock fanfiction posted on the website, pardon my pronunciation, I believe this would be in Mandarin, Xianzhu, around October of 2011, introduced Omegaverse to Chinese slash fan circles, from which it spread to Danmei original novels. And if you are not familiar with the term slash fiction, you know, if you're on AO3, you'll see a couple and it'll have one of their names and then a slash and then the other person's name, which denotes that they will be in a romantic relationship in the work. That's slash fiction. That's why it's called that, is because there's a slash in the tag. And obviously that delineation is much older than AO3, but that is where the origin came from, and that is the spark of those tagging courtesies on AO3. In 2012, the notion of fated mates was introduced. In 2014, Omegaverse gained strong traction in Japan, acquiring market value with the publication of the first Omegaverse manga in 2015. In 2016, the discrimination and power dynamics began to be outlined, and the idea of like mating bites and mating marks that would biologically link people together was starting to become more commonplace. And in 2018, we were starting to get the whole like inner wolf instinct thing coming. And then I was unaware of this, but in, I believe, 2018 also, I'm not so sure, they didn't have a year on this, manga artist Shinshi Nakai tried to add the Enigma designation, which we would be familiar with from Pit Babe, which would be a new type of character that can mutate their secondary gender. But apparently, when that was attempted to be introduced, it received huge pushback from the Omegaverse community, and it never really caught on. Obviously, we know that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's not generally widely known or widely accepted by the Omegaverse fan culture. Which would explain why I, as a huge Omegaverse fan, had absolutely no idea what an Enigma was when they were introduced in Pit Babe. I was so incredibly confused. And I was like, I'm very familiar with this genre, and I have never heard of anything like this before. But it would make sense if this was a thing, it was just never a big thing. And then starting in 2018, but really kind of coming to a head in the cultural zeitgeist in 2020, was the Omegaverse lawsuit. I was following this so closely. It was so fascinating to me as an Omegaverse fan. It was about two authors actually who publish books on Amazon. I believe they just do ebooks. I don't know if they do physical books. To female authors who would write about Omegaverse, but they would have, you know, female omegas and male alphas and that kind of thing. And one of them tried to sue the other for copying her idea, and the other one was basically saying, this is an extremely popular internet subculture trope. Like, you don't own this. Just because you might have been one of the first people to record something like this does not mean it's yours. It's a trope. It's like saying you own the trope of a character finding a dragon egg. Like, you can't own that. You can't own something like that. Time progressed, as it does, and we get the news that Pit Babe, an Omegaverse Thai BL novel, is being adapted into a show. I, as an Omegaverse fan, was extremely excited, though I honestly didn't think that they were going to adapt the Omegaverse aspect, because a lot of people were saying that they weren't going to, and I was generally totally honest. I didn't think they would be brave enough. I was like, there's no way they're going to do that. They are way too scared. They're not going to do it. And then they proved me wrong, and they did do it. Well, they sort of did it. I was not a huge fan of how they portrayed Omegaverse in the show. I can't speak to how accurate it is to the novel, again, because I haven't read the novel. But I always felt like, at least in the show, it was only being used as a cash grab for headlines and for marketing purposes. It was extremely clear to me that the showrunners were never committed to the Omegaverse aspect of the show. They really didn't do anything with it. I always just kind of thought that the show was X-Men, but they called the X-Men alphas instead of X-Men. To the best of my knowledge, in the show, they never even mention any other designation except alpha, and then there's like the two enigmas. They never mention betas, they never mention omegas. I know they do in the novel, but if we are strictly going by the show, which is all I'm going by, those other designations don't exist as far as we know. I am operating under the TV show and the novel being separate creative entities. So just because betas and omegas existed in the novel, we cannot necessarily take that at face value for the TV show. They change plots for TV shows all the time. So if you're going to be screaming in the comments about how there's betas and omegas in the book, I understand, but we're talking about the TV show. They also never used any of the common tropes and things associated with the Omegaverse. There's none of like the mating cycle thing. There's barely anything with heightened senses. The only person who has heightened senses is Babe, and that's because that's his X-Man power. And usually in the Omegaverse, everybody with a designation has heightened senses. That's one of the reasons I really couldn't wrap my head around the fact that Tony was so obsessed with Babe, because I'm like, okay, he can smell really well. Can't other people also do that if they are allegedly alphas? So, yeah, I was never a huge fan of how they were portraying the Omegaverse, mostly because I felt like they weren't portraying the Omegaverse. They were just kind of like half heartedly doing something for marketing and headlines. That's not to say I didn't like the show. I did. I have been consistently reading fan fiction in the show since it went off the air. I'm excited for season 2, but I was, as an Omegaverse fan, did not really enjoy how they portrayed that. But they did choose to portray it, which now brings us to the controversy. To the best of my researching knowledge, all of this began on December 28th of 2024. The author of the Pit Babe novel posted this, which I will put on the screen. And this was a translation that I found online. I did not put this through a translator because I find them unreliable and kind of nonsensical when it comes to certain languages. I feel like Thai can be very hit or miss with translation. So I was out looking for somebody who actually seemed like they had translated this themselves. The second part of the novel, Poison Babe, began as a script for the script Pit Babe the Series Season 2, the Initium. Therefore, the content that you will read from now on will be a story that continues from the series version of Poison Babe, making the plot, characters, and some details different from the first part of the novel version. In addition, in this part, everyone will meet the version of, I think that's supposed to be Pit Babe. That might have just been translated badly, I'm sorry. Everyone will meet the version of Pit Babe that we, as the writer, expected to see in the first part of the series. That means removing the Omegaverse from the entire storyline because we have seen the problems of this type of storyline and no longer intend to publish works in a format that conflicts with our own beliefs and ideas. This makes this Pit Babe part a complete racing-themed fantasy novel. We hope that all readers will understand and be open-minded with this change because we believe that the new version of Pit Babe will give readers a lot more and will be a novel that we can proudly present once again. Editing me here, I also wanted to post this here. The author made a response to the backlash they were getting and basically said that this was their idea for a season 2 and a book 2, and that this was not confirmed going to be the script for season 2. This was just what they wanted to do, and that is here on the screen now if you want to read it. So a few things here. Pit Babe was not even supposed to have a sequel, according to this. The only reason the only reason they are writing a sequel, I don't know if the author is a man or a woman. The only reason they're writing a sequel is because the show got a season 2. So the author wants to make some coin, so is writing a book 2. I'm also extremely curious as to what these beliefs and ideas are that make the author think that Omegaverse is problematic and conflicting that they didn't have when they were writing the first book. And if this is the case, why aren't you completely rewriting the series? Why are you only now just starting the change with book 2? It feels like to me as a fan, you hook fans of this trope for money and then you don't actually like the trope, so you want to ditch it going forward. And that just feels really disingenuous and just, makes me as a fan not feel very good. I also am confused by them saying everyone will meet the version of Pit Babe that we, as the writer, expected to see in the first part of the series. If that was what you wanted from the start, why did you write an Omegaverse story to begin with? That's another reason that it kind of makes me, as a fan of the genre, upset because it's like this person is explicitly stating, oh, we used it as a cash grab. And now that we've got the money and we've hooked you, you're weird and we don't like you and we think you're problematic. We still want your money though. And does this mean that they're no longer going to be selling the first Pit Babe novel? Because this statement says, we no longer intend to publish works in a format that conflicts with our own beliefs and ideas. So, does that mean that the first book is not going to be sold anymore? Does this mean they don't want anyone to watch season one? They think that they're going to boycott season one? I didn't hear anything about this, but it's against your beliefs and ideas. So, why aren't you coming out against it? On the one hand, yes, authors can do what they want, it's their world. On the other hand, I am a firm believer as a reader and as a writer myself that when you create a work and you publish it out into the world, it is no longer just yours anymore. There's a poem I had to read in school. I believe it is by Anne Bradstreet, and it's called An Author to Her Book. And basically, the entire poem is about how she, as an author, she gives birth to this story, but she understands that once that story is out in the world and that story is being perceived by others, it's not just hers anymore. She cannot control the way other people perceive her work or interact with it or what they choose to take away from it. And I do believe that authors have a social contract with their readers and fans. Like if someone is publishing a young adult romance and then halfway through the series decides, actually, I'm going to have the love interest die. This is going to become a murder mystery and then is really angsty on book like 3 out of 5. That's breaking the social contract with your readers, in my opinion. You sold these readers a young adult romance. There are trappings that come with that. And if you break that social contract and you break that trust with your fans, that's almost impossible to get back. Just look at the last season of Game of Thrones and what happened to the directors of that show. So I'm of the mind that if you all of a sudden think the Omegaverse is against your beliefs and ideals, whatever, you're entitled to that opinion. You need to quit selling the first book in the series, officially denounce season 1 of the show, say you don't support it anymore, and say nobody else should either. Completely rewrite your series with this new way that you want it to be done. And I don't know, sell the rights to that, petition for season 1 to be remade. But continuing to make money off of this thing that you say is conflicting with your own personal beliefs, now that you've got everybody hooked and now that you've got all the money, that's just so icky to me. And I don't know this author. I don't know them as a person. I don't even know their name. I don't know if they're a man or a woman. I cannot speak to them as a person. I am only speaking as a fan of a work to the creator of said work. It kind of reminds me of a book I tried to read once where all of the marketing of the book led me to believe it was going to be a fantasy. And then when I started to read it, it turns out it was actually a dystopian. I felt so betrayed by the marketing. I literally put the book down at about a quarter of the way through, and I have never once even wanted to try and finish it. But there's a reason that deceptive marketing like that is generally not recommended, because if your fans and your readers feel like you've betrayed them, you almost can never get that back. This author who wrote that book, I have never read another book by them. I have never touched another book by them, and I've never wanted to. I felt so betrayed by the way that that first series was marketed that I've never been able to trust them again. This might all blow over and everything will progress and the show will be popular and season 2 will be whatever it's going to be. I can really only speak for myself. But what about you guys? I'm really interested about your opinions on this. I hope that none of you think I went too hard, that none of you thought I was being too harsh. That is not my intention. I'm really just trying to express my feelings as a fan, I guess, a fan of the show, a fan of the Omegaverse trope, a fan of BLs as a genre. So please take all of my comments as the kindest that I could have meant them, because that is genuinely what I meant. I do not hardly ever mean anything I say. If it can be construed in a really horrible way, That is never the way that I mean it. So I hope we can all stay kind in the comments as well. And please like this video and subscribe to my channel so we can grow the Dramatic family, and share this video with a friend who also liked Pit Babe or also loves the Omegaverse. And feel free to follow me on all my other social medias. They'll be linked in the description box below. But that's all for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!